Okay, welcome everybody. It's 2 o'clock and we're going to get started. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar. We will post it on the NECAFS website after the session. Elizabeth, just to confirm, I have started recording. The presenters today will be myself, Chris Callahan with University of Vermont Extension, and Michael Botello from Massachusetts Department of Ag Resources. Initially, I'm going to start out with everybody else muted. It just helps with getting audio under control initially. But if you have a question or a comment that you want to bring up during the session, please put it in the chat box, and we will get you unmuted if needed, or just repeat your question to make sure it's, or comment to make sure it's heard. This is the February 2017 NECAFS webinar, and the topic today is an overview of the 2017 annual meeting that was held in Boston at the beginning of January. The meeting itself was held jointly by NECAFS and by NIASDA. Michael Botello and I were sitting next to each other in a Produce Safety Alliance training last summer, and we were talking about the potential for a collaborative meeting, and the idea was born there that we hold the meeting together and have it be an opportunity to get educators, researchers, and regulators all together in the same room to try to work through some of our challenges together. So that was the motivation for the meeting. We ended up having 57 people attend, pretty diverse range of roles in the food safety realm, and we had representation, I believe, from every state in the region, including the District of Columbia. The overall program for the annual meeting started with a national level program sharing by Doreen Goubet and A. Brown from the FDA Office of Regulatory Affairs, and also from Art Johnstone from NASDA, and that helped sort of set the framework for the rest of the discussion. But the real meat of the annual meeting was sort of state by state sharing of what the regulatory programs what regulatory programs were planned in each state, and what the approach looked like so far. We also, when each state was sharing information, had an opportunity for educators and researchers to share their work as well. And I just want to take a moment and hopefully tab over to the NECAFS website just to make sure everybody's aware that this material is available. Material from the annual meeting is available on the NECAFS website, and I pasted the link in the chat box as well. So for starters, we wrote up a full report summarizing the annual meeting, and that's available here. And I'm going to provide a bit of a summary of this today. I do want to thank Elizabeth Newbold, Nicole Richard, Amanda Kinchel, and Michael Botello for contributing to these to this report. Amanda and Nicole in particular for helping so much capture the discussion that day, which was no small task. The state level summary begins. Give me 1 second. The state level begins on page 5, and so you can see each state. We broke it down by regulatory framework update and education and research update. not to unnecessarily draw a line between the two, but that tended to be how the conversation broke down. And so there's a summary here from each state, which might be helpful to folks who weren't able to make the meeting. So that's available on the annual meeting website, on the annual meeting page of the NECAFS website. The other thing that's available are the presentations from that day, and so there's an intro and agenda, but more importantly, an FDA, Dorian Goubet and Abe Brown's presentation from the FDA, Office of Regulatory Affairs, and then also Maryland and Massachusetts presentations about their state programs, and Vermont's presentation. Is Michael Botello on? Let me check. Not seeing him. That's okay. We'll check back later. So finally, following state level updates and national updates, we took an opportunity to sort of reflect on what everybody saw and heard during the day, and to discuss briefly some ideas about what common questions or concerns there were, and what emerging themes were starting to come out of the group discussion. And that's where I'm planning to spend my time this afternoon. So for starters, the emerging themes, concerns, or questions are broken down between regulatory, education, and then what I've called cross-cutting topics. On the regulatory side, there were a number of questions remaining around the farm inventories, what level of detail, how privacy would be maintained, and how that all would be integrated. I've also tried to identify here what action or planned action was either identified in the meeting or has sort of become more clear following the meeting. In this case, this is one that NASDA and FDA are actively working on, and I'm sure it'll be the topic of conversation next week at the National Consortium meeting in Florida. By the way, March 24th, the NECAFS webinar will be a report out from that National Consortium meeting. That's the meeting that's taking place in Orlando next week between all the state programs hosted by NASDA. So March 24th at 1 p.m., NECAFS will have a webinar that's a report out from that meeting, a little bit more detail on state programs. There was a concern raised over conflicts of interest, so this had to do in particular with the way technical support or technical service providers work with and alongside regulators, or the degree to which regulators can provide technical support. In other words, can the folks who are doing auditing or inspection provide technical support and pre-compliance review? And this is one that remains open, I think, but among many of the topics, I think the future action is let's stay connected on it, and let's articulate and share models that are planned and that seem to be working, and just have some open discussion and review of those. There were concerns about having, if every state has a unique program, then there were concerns about how producers in one state might gain market access across state borders. And so I think working along the lines of a NASDA model law, and at the very least sharing plans among states will help to identify the path forward there. Farms and food businesses that are exempt, concern is that there will be a decline in local food since buyers are going to start demanding that growers be FSMA compliant, quote unquote. So this is the idea of market demand versus regulatory requirement driving development. And I mean, in terms of the NECAFS perspective on this, one of our one of our reasons for being is to make sure that all enterprises that are affected by FSMA have access to the resources and training to be to succeed. And so the word choice is important. It's affected by, not necessarily covered by. So that's always been part of our mission, is to make sure that all enterprises have access to resources they need. It remains an issue, I think, for various states to consider how their specific program might translate across borders. There were concerns that guidance from the FDA will not be available in time for implementation dates. That remains a concern, and the one way that we've seen it being addressed is through the provision of add-on or supplemental materials. So for example, add-on or supplemental materials beyond the PSA standardized curriculum being provided to help provide a little bit more specific direction than can currently be provided by the final rule. The risk, of course, is that ultimate guidance might deviate from these materials, and so trying to stay connected on that remains important. And then the other thing that came up with regard to regulatory topics is the need for states to coordinate, plan, and take advantage of available financial resources. And so one idea was to share planned and potential working models, again, perhaps via the NECAFS webinar series. That may be something that we return to in March based on some of the outcomes of the Florida meeting. Educational research topics that came up, themes, concerns, or questions. There was a concern that Extension may not have the capacity to provide the level of technical assistance needed. This is raised across the board. I think there's a realization that not every state has all of the resources necessary for their stakeholders to progress, and that also was the basis, one of the bases for our original proposal for NECAFS, was to help connect expertise that resides in one state with a need in another state as much as possible. I will also say that I know that many of the state extensions are actively recruiting and hiring and building up capacity as well as training. Getting enough people trained and trained properly that will be responsible for helping growers meeting implementation requirements. This remains a bit of a challenge, and actually kind of a very near-term challenge. The first round of lead trainer delivery was completed last year, both for FSPCA and the PSA. And NECAFS is actively trying to assess just to what degree, just how much need there is in the region for additional lead trainers. So if you are somebody who either has a need to be a lead trainer or knows others who need to be, it would be really helpful for us to hear from you directly. You could just shoot an email to necafs@uvm.edu. And you may also see a survey on this topic next week from us. One of the very common points made on the evaluations coming back to us after the annual meeting was that there appears to be a lot of great work going on across the region, but there seems to be a lot of duplication and redundancy. Can we find a way to host a list of ongoing regional work or otherwise improve coordination and collaboration? Absolutely, and this is something that Elizabeth and I have started working on in earnest. We're planning to develop a clearinghouse for resources, people, and projects, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. I have a slide specifically on that one. Michael, I see that you've called in. I'll get you unmuted here in just a minute. Other emerging themes, concerns, and questions. These are more joint or cross-cutting. So one question raised was, do extension and departments of ag actually understand each other's roles? There should be more opportunities to allow for open communication between these groups. I think the annual meeting was a great first step, particularly on a regional level. I think also within individual states that probably needs to continue happening. This is something that I think is variable across the region based on my observations, but it is definitely something that NECAFS would like to support. And you know, one way we're trying to do this is by starting with a March webinar that focuses specifically on some of the report out from the state agencies meeting down in Florida. So there will probably be other opportunities for more direct connection across agencies. And another point made was, you know, is there any opportunity to provide financial support for the grower? There is a long way that growers need to go to adopt food safety. This is something that we definitely have identified within NECAFS as an area where we might pursue additional funding, and perhaps via a multi-state proposal of some sort. I think it's also an area that each state should probably have some initiative for as well. In other words, looking for opportunities to leverage state funding for federal funding or vice versa. And it's definitely an area where I think that I think is cross-cutting. In other words, will require both extension and Department of Ag collaboration. Okay, a couple more slides and then we can open it up. So the three main actions that we're taking right away as NECAFS is from this annual meeting. One is to get this one-stop shop finally established, and the idea is have it be a web-based clearinghouse for FSMA-related resources and projects. And the way I sum up what we're trying to accomplish is we want to collect what we know. So that is the rules, courses, add-on materials, etc. What we know we don't know. In other words, what are the clear questions that remain to be answered? And for example, things that might feed into research projects to have questions answered. And then people and projects, who's doing what, where, so that we can start to identify opportunities for improved collaboration, or at the very least affinity. So that's something, as I mentioned, Elizabeth and I are working with a web developer to get something going on that, and the idea is that it would be as I said, an online platform where anybody would have the opportunity to add material to it, and it would likely be moderated to make sure that, for example, that the materials that we're posting are reviewed in some form. But that'll be an online network and clearinghouse. Actively support and coordinate trainer and lead trainer development in the region. NECAFS has a trainer support stipend program in place to provide financial support. The challenge we're having currently is availability of those lead trainer courses. And so we need to hear from the folks in the region about their needs or the needs of people they know, so that we can justify holding specific courses in the region. Right now we just lack the courses. And both PSA and the FSPCA have minimum attendance thresholds, so it's really important for us to know who needs this, so that we can justify the course. And then continue seeking regional coordination opportunities, and especially to seek opportunities to engage governmental, academic, extension, and practitioners together. The annual meeting really was a great chance to see how this can happen, in my opinion. And it was really, for many people, the first time first time regulators and educators are really sitting in the same room together and talking about this topic, at least at the regional level. So we're eager to do this again virtually and also in person. We do plan another annual meeting probably toward the end of 2017, and so that'll be the next in-person opportunity. But we also plan several webinars, and we have a number of working groups that are coming out of the annual meeting as well, and just starting to form. That would provide an opportunity for more focused, direct collaboration. Just a couple other reminders. I mentioned the NECAFS webinar coming up in March. And then the other thing is we're trying to assess the need for train-the-trainer courses in the region. I mentioned PSA and FSPCA, but also Sprout. If anybody has a specific need, we would like to hear about it so that we can try to get a training coordinated. I am going to try to unmute everybody. If you don't immediately have something that you want to add or a question, mute yourself on your end, because otherwise we'll probably end up with a lot of feedback. But I know Michael Botello is called in and may have some things to add to this. So let me try this. I'm going to unmute everybody. Okay, that went pretty well. Michael, are you able to hear me?
I'm able to hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, you're good to go. Anything to add to that?
Oh, perfect. No, the only thing, no, I would just like to reinforce what you said. I thought it was a wonderful meeting. I think there were a lot of ideas that were shared there. I think there were a lot of concerns, but the dialogue definitely commenced at that meeting, and I feel very positive as to what we're doing here in the region. So,
great, thanks. And can you just give a little bit of background on the meeting in Florida next week and what the plan is or what the agenda looks like and what we might expect in March as a report out?
Yeah, sure, I can definitely do that. So next week, the state agencies, or at least those states who have entered into the cooperative agreement with FDA, will be attending the first National Produce Safety Symposium. NASDA is the lead coordinator for that meeting, and based on my understanding, all 42 states and territories that have entered into the cooperative agreement will be attending. I know there's some educators going. I know that I think Wes will be there. I don't know if Wes is on the line. I think perhaps Betsy as well, to talk about the on-farm readiness reviews. And this will be we will be basically discussing the state model implementation framework that NASDA has put together. That is, was developed to provide consistency across the state produce programs as they roll out. So I'm looking forward to it. I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue, particularly on a lot of key deliverables for our first year, and that includes the development of a strategic plan, as well as the commencement of farm registry operations. And there's a whole bunch of details in the middle of all that the states are looking for some information on, and I'm looking forward to it and feel it's going to be a very constructive meeting.
Great, thanks, Michael. Andy Falens from NOFA New York has added a comment in the chat box. Can the one-stop shop also include a registry of certified trainers, lead trainers, and their affiliations and resumes? This would be helpful for training class organizers. I hear you, Andy. One of the challenges there is that the lead trainer certification occurs at the PSA, FSPCA, and Sprout Alliances. For starters, we don't have easy access to it, and even just trying to pull together a list of courses available in our region is challenging currently. So that said, we'll do our best to at least make that information more easily accessible. I want to stop short of duplicating information that exists elsewhere, but the other challenge is keeping it current. And so if there's an organization that's already charged with doing that and has systems in place, then we should depend on that. But I hear you in terms of making it easier to get at the information. Other thoughts? Let's see. So Nicole Richard notes that FSPCA has a list of trainers that can be linked. Yeah, we're sorting through some of that. Some of the information on the various Alliance web pages is more easily linked than others. But having access to an easy list of trainers would be great.
One other thing about the FSPCA lead trainers, just a reminder for those that that are interested in being a lead instructor. In order to participate in the lead instructor course, which we are trying to host in Rhode Island in June, and we are looking to demonstrate additional participants in order for that to happen. But to do so, all participants have to first be vetted as an approved person for lead instruction.
Approved candidate, correct?
Yes, sorry, thank you. The term is an approved candidate. So the first step in that process is you have to show your credentials, and those details are posted on the FSPCA website. So you submit that part first, and then they will tell you if you have the right credentials to go forward. And then you have to go to a QI training, and then you're able to go to an instruction.
Thanks, Amanda, for the clarification. How about folks who were at the annual meeting? Anything that you wanted to make sure was mentioned that I may have skipped over? And just remember, everybody's unmuted now, so you can just speak up if you want, or drop a comment in the chat box.
Hi, Chris. This is Chelsea with the Local Food Safety Collaborative.
Hey, Chelsea.
I was just curious. I know at the meeting we had talked about having a call with people in the Northeast who have or are conducting a needs assessment, and I wasn't sure if that was still like a plan to have the call in that manner, or.
Thanks for the reminder. It is definitely planned, although not specifically. So I'll take a note here to actually get that set up. One of the things that came up during the annual meeting was that we had a number of needs assessments either done, in progress, or planned around the region, and various types of needs assessments. So, but primarily focused on what the need for training among practitioners was. And Chelsea is reminding us that we had suggested it might be a good thing to coordinate that. So I got the note, Chelsea, and we'll get something started. Anything else? Elizabeth, anything from your end?
No, that's great. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the working group discussion that you briefly touched on.
Yep.
And too, that if I will be reaching out to folks, but if there is interest from people in those working groups to fill them out a little, we'll have a summary of those working groups, and always looking for volunteers and people who might be interested in participating.
Can you run down the list for me, what the current working groups look like?
Sure. There were 4 that we had identified. One was to look at the overlap between those who are affected by the produce safety rule and those affected by the preventive controls rule, so folks who fall in between both, the in-betweeners. Look at the overlap between those groups of people. That was one of the working groups. Another working group was a group of farmers. So what are the actual needs of farmers? A group specifically made up of farmers. A group of buyers, so that there could be an identification of maybe some information produced to send to buyers on what kinds of specific information they could be asking growers for, and some clarification on what FSMA actually is, and some of the dates and timelines, and just some more information for buyers, and then the last group was a funding group. So to find, like you mentioned, funding sources for growers, other ideas for funding sources around Bismarck and throughout the region to help with the those were the 4 groups, and if I'm missing something, I'm glad that Chelsea brought up the needs assessment call. If there was other things that you thought came out of that group that I'm not mentioning, please let me know, but those were the 4 that we identified.
Great. So I've added needs assessment just as a 5th, just to make sure we get that call arranged. But, yeah. Okay, how about for folks who weren't able to join the annual meeting, was there anything, any specific questions folks had or comments?
Hey Chris, this is Vern.
Hey Vern.
You alluded to it, but I'm wondering, was there any further conversation about how states with different programs for the what is this called, categorically exempt group, so like CAPS in Vermont and Massachusetts, Maryland program, some reciprocity or accreditation system to allow these to go forward, or did I hear you say that that is out of favor to have a diversity of local programs?
So I didn't say that. The different state programs I was referring to was for example, the different state statute programs. So not necessarily the voluntary accreditation programs, but it's a good question that's along the same lines. So we've got a range of qualification or certification or accreditation programs that will ultimately be available in each state. And then to me and to others at the meeting, there's this question of how do you then translate between states from those various programs. So Michael might have some thoughts on this. I mean, thinking about the CQP program in Massachusetts and how that translates to other states, or how Vermont CAPS might translate into Massachusetts. And I know it's maybe early days, but any thoughts, Michael?
Well, Bert, the plan here is to once again provide services, inspectional/audit services to our farms independent of their produce safety coverage, particularly those who require market access. And with our statute, we have adopted the produce safety rule in its entirety, but given us a little flexibility to perform inspections and or audits on non-covered produce and farms that fall, once again, in a qualified exemption or a full exemption. That's our plan. There's a little complexity there in terms of, the funding under Comp A. Comp B has only been allocated to support the covered farms. I see no problem with I don't see a very large possibility of very big variations between the state produce programs under the produce safety rule when they roll out. I'm not sure what states are going to do when it comes to supporting those farms, once again, that are outside of the exemption patterns. I know that Vermont is planning, and if Abby's on, she could speak to it, is planning to support those smaller growers. I think a lot of the other states I've spoken to, the PIs and co-PIs offline, have said they're interested in doing the same thing. So, whether that translates into FDA funding support for that or that's covered through state capital, that's the real big question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that, that's a piece of it, is the support. But I guess just thinking ahead, it's not urgent, but that there's some discussion of a framework for, again, reciprocity or accreditation or some minimum. I mean, I think everyone's addressing the same issues, but how would you sort of just assure that programs have some oversight down the road in terms of, meeting the essential requirements to be credible, even though it's not required by law.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I think that that's something that we can achieve in the region, and I think that it's going to be very hard for states, particularly in our region, particularly in New England, since most of our growers are small, to not provide that support moving forward, particularly since we've been doing it already, right? So.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Well, hopefully the webinar served to at least get folks oriented or reoriented on what we talked about almost 2 months ago now. Remember, there are materials available from the annual meeting on the NECAFS website, both the full summary report, but also the presentations. And also be on the lookout for that note or the survey about lead trainer opportunities, because we definitely need to hear from you on that. With that, I'll just ask one more time if anybody else has anything to add. Elizabeth or Michael?
No, I'm all set, Chris.
Okay. Then I think we will call it for today. Thanks everybody for your time, and we'll see you in March.
Have a good one.